Hello everyone and welcome to Mappers, and we are on episode 8, and I'm hanging out here with Archville, Iron Man SC, and Super Uman for episode 8, as Archville will be joining us once again because Prodigy cannot. So here we go, guys. We are on episode 8 now. Thank you very much everybody who is tuning in today. Appreciate everybody who's tuned in on a regular basis. Caught the show on the VODs via YouTube, on the stream or whatever. Just as a heads up, might be a little bit of extra noise here and there. Travis is taking care of his baby niece?
Nieces and nephews.
Niece? Okay, niece. So,
aren't you a daddy?
He's not the daddy.
One of them's taking a nap and right next door, so it's like, good timing, people.
But it's cool because stuff like that happens, so it's no big deal. But just giving everybody viewing a heads up, so if you're like, what is that noise? It's probably just a baby, don't worry about it. So anyways, how's everybody's weekend or week since the last show been? I know I've been really busy. How about you guys?
That's great. Really great.
Been a little bit of a crazy week, Travis?
Yes.
I know personally I actually ended up, I went to Wisconsin this weekend because I'm looking at potentially moving up there. I live by Chicago right now, and I might actually be moving up to Wisconsin for work because something's got to support this esports habit. So, I'll have to wait and see. Stuff happens, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. And it looks like his camera is freezing a little bit. Do I have the, I gotta check something with, Iron Man's camera here before we get too far. There we go. Got his camera updating properly now. I didn't have the captured layer window thing on, which we discovered in one of the previous episodes dealing with to make sure the Google Plus cameras update. So guys, we got some new topics for today. We have, we're gonna actually revisit briefly the FRB stuff because right now they're actually working on, well, I should say Baron is working on potentially starting a new mod for the free, fewer resources per base concept. And I'm going to actually bring that up onto the screen here in just a moment. That's going to be our first topic, so we'll just get right into it. Unless anybody needs to get something off their chest about the weekend. Travis seems a little distressed this week.
Been a lot of drama, a lot of relationship stuff, so I'm actually good now. I've had a pretty good day today.
He's clean. He's clean.
He's clean.
I'm clean. Well, I just got out of the shower, so.
Alright, so I'm going to bring it up onto the screen here for our first topic. And this just shows the thread. I'll actually go ahead and then link it into the chat in case anybody wants to check it out. It's the official fewer resource per base mod. And basically he's looking to create a mod that, as far as I read into it, would be kind of similar to the OBS maps in the sense that, like, it's a little bit of a twist on the original maps, but it basically would convert resource nodes automatically to be updated for fewer resources per bases, where rather than actually like reducing the number of mineral patches, it would mod the amount of minerals mined per trip. So 8 mineral fields would be reduced to 4 per trip, 1,500 total, 1 gas geyser, 6 per trip, 5,000 total each for a high yield. So it basically just reduces down the amount of gas you get per trip and would adjust everything. He's got some pictures of before and after. It changes some of the colors and such forth, and he's got some statistics coming out of the fewer resources per base. So I think it's a very interesting mod, and I'm just kind of curious on what you guys' thoughts are on actually creating a mod where you basically wouldn't have to even create the FRB map specifically for FRB, and is something like a mod where you can just basically apply it to any map going to actually be feasible and work well, considering the fact that obviously with fewer resources per base the maps have seemed to play a little bit differently. So is this something you guys think is good and it will be really useful to continue testing the FRB concept, or do you feel like FRB would actually need to be have new maps made specifically made for it?
I think it's great. I was looking through it, and one of the things that struck me about the 6 mineral patches is that you saturate mineral line way too fast. Already at 12 workers, you have the full saturation, not optimum. You get diminishing returns after 12 workers. So you pretty much instantly saturate the mineral line. In the early game, it affects a lot of strategies. Whether you put your barracks down at 13, 14, or 15 is much less relevant after 12 workers. It leaves much more strategy when you still have 8 patches. At the same time, I feel like it causes a problem that you get too many workers. You simply can't expand fast enough. You get to a point where you have full saturation, and then you get the choice between stop making workers or expand. And you can't expand that fast. It's showed in the FRB tournament that players who expanded too fast would get killed. I saw 1 base timing attacks versus 3 base players, which is kind of odd. But that's how it worked, and it's definitely a step in the right direction to just reduce the income. And simply because that's how it is. And I was thinking about something. Now I forgot it. Anyways, I think that's a nice change. The geyser is still 1 geyser per base. I don't like that. I would prefer 2 geysers with reduced returns, simply because of the strategic options that you can choose between having 1 or 2 geysers. And a gas steal means 100% gas steal instead of a 50% gas steal. So, anyways, I think that it's good. It's a good change.
Super. It looked like you had some thoughts on it.
For minerals, why do you think saturating faster is worse? Because for me, it just may give a player more. How do you say? It will give more advantage to expand,
right?
Because they would need an overexpand. How do you say?
So you like the idea of the mod because it forces you to expand more.
Yeah.
So with the overall concept, but as far as the mod's concerned, really the biggest difference between the mod and what we were talking about before is in the original there was only like 6 mineral patches and 1 gas. The mod leaves in 8 mineral patches, but still reduces it to 1 gas. So obviously, with what Archville was saying, with you having too many workers too quickly previously, that would remedy that a little bit. But then I was also additionally posing the question of will it work with existing maps?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the existing maps would work a lot better than the custom created maps. As I said last week, I'm not a fan of the new maps specially designed for.
Yeah, I don't like Paris map either. They just look too strange.
Mm-hmm.
And by using the actual map, you can see the difference between a game on a Chakras Plateau Normalization and Chakras Plateau FRB. You could see really clearly the difference.
Yeah.
For the testings, please.
So overall, you guys would look at this as a step in the right direction for FRB then, to be more of a mod and be able to test it that way on existing maps that have had a lot of game testing as far as just general balance of the map goes versus the old style.
I still don't. I still see potential in it. I just don't see it coming to absolute completion where it could potentially be in the game, because StarCraft 2 is much more fast-paced than Brood War in terms of timings and just the way the game is played out. And FRB is basically taking a Brood War concept and applying it to StarCraft 2, which means the game is still fast-paced, but it's like you're trying to play a fast-paced game by spreading it out more, and it it's kind of weird when you really think about it, because it goes back to what I was saying the other week. People say like, oh well, FRB makes multiple battles and engagements more common. It's like, it's common because the people who play them in the tournaments and stuff, like, they are of high caliber. Like, that's just the way they play by default. And in GSL and NASL and other big tournaments like that, like, they already play like that with scouts everywhere and small engagements here, small engagement there. Like, it's already in the game. FRB at its utmost is just saying, okay, this is a fast-paced game, but we're going to try and slow it down, which you can't by simply expanding more. So it's like you would have to.
It's just reducing the amount of units you can make, but that doesn't really slow it down, does it?
It doesn't. You would have to literally like work with the production of buildings and units, and potentially probably even slow them down, or slow down the speed of the game even, to actually make FRB a little more workable, I guess you could say. I don't know. It's just it's like you're taking a fast-paced game and trying to stretch it out when you just can't. Like, you just can't.
I don't see why you would need to reduce the production speed, because I didn't see any. Do you see anything that could show this in the game I watched?
Well, I guess the good point that Travis is making is, like, when you watch a GSL, you watch an MLG, you watch IPL, whatever the tournament is, right? When you look at the highest level of play, you already, especially as the players have gotten better at the game, because, like, in the old days everything was like one base, two base, right? Like, Terran did one base all-ins. I mean, that was like all they did. Everything was 4-gate out of Protoss or some slight variation thereof. If I'm not going to do 4-gate, I'm going to do 3-gate plus a proxy Stargate. Ooh, it's twist. I mean, there was a lot of one-base play and such forth at the beginning of StarCraft 2. And then it kind of hit a phase where people started expanding, and they got a little bit more passive, and you had these big death balls. But then you had another evolution past that in the last probably 6 months or so, where you've seen the players start to do a lot more multitasking. You're seeing a lot more small army engagements. You see a lot more drops out of Terran. You see a lot more splitting up of army out of Zerg. You see a lot more of Protoss still death balls to an extent, but even Protoss players you see starting to do a little bit more of like push timings and breaking up their units. Like Blink Stalkers now have become very popular to have away from the rest of your army, or maybe you have a couple of Stalkers back home with your Sentries and Zealots and Colossus or whatever, but now you'll have like a pack of like 8 to 10 Blink Stalkers moving around the map, trying to use their mobility to harass and do damage to the opponent while the rest of the army is either defending back home while they try and max or whatever. And it seems to me like the point that you're trying to make that might be lost a little bit with the FRB concept is a lot of the skirmishes and small skirmishes that the players have gotten better is already starting to happen. And if fewer resources per bases actually wants to slow the pace of the game down, if that's really the goal. Because, I mean, Brood War was obviously a slower-paced game, and that was kind of like an homage to the start of this project, as people felt like StarCraft 2 was moving too fast, you get maxed out too fast, and you had these big engagements. And for a time, that was definitely true. But as of recent, you're seeing less and less of that at the highest level. You might still see it at the lowest level, but even with an FRB map, you're probably still going to see it at the lowest level. People are still going to sit around until they max out because that's what they do. They don't want to attack. They're afraid to attack. They're afraid to die at any moment. So they're going to sit around and max out if they can. I mean, a bronze level game, you almost always see some kind of a one-base all-in, or you see both guys play super, super defensively with like 55 cannons and spine crawlers until they can max out, and then they eventually get up enough courage to smash into each other and one of them wins. But, I mean, you're still probably going to see that to an extent. And I think the point you're trying to make is FRB doesn't necessarily slow down any of that play or make it any different. If anything, it maybe just makes the game take a little bit longer than it would otherwise. It doesn't really address the topic, it's just stretching it.
I think that the only thing that really slows down is the how fast you make it, how long it takes to grow a big army, and how long it takes before you hit the cap. And that's a great thing that it takes longer. I mean, engagements still take the same time. I mean, if you have 10 stalkers versus 20 marines, it's the same as 5 stalkers versus 10 marines, right? It's just the math, you know.
Right.
So it doesn't slow the game down in that regard. It's only slowing down how fast you produce your army, and that doesn't really slow down the game like that. And that's a good change. It is simply too easy to max out. It feels artificial to have that 200 cap. You really want to have that cap in the game only so that, well, you can't grow infinite army, but you really don't want to hit that cap as rarely as possible, and FRB does that.
Yeah. Although I would say there probably is at least some credence in Travis's thoughts that to really, truly make it work, there might need to be other changes made besides just the mineral count. I mean, whether it's balance changes, whether it's balance changes probably required because changing the amount of units people can get out will throw balance off, or even fiddling around with production or something like he said. That's definitely something that should probably eventually be looked into.
No. It comes down to the design of the races. It comes down to the design of the races. Back in Brood War, you did not have an inject larva.
Right.
You were stuck with was it 3 larvae or like 4? Yeah, 3.
Yeah.
You had to throw it down
and now you can pop
hatcheries.
out like up to 8 or whatever on one hatchery. It's like, of course you can max easily. There is no, there's a 12-minute roach max, but there's no 12-minute marine max or zealot max or stalker max or anything like that, because it comes down to these sorts of changes. FRB doesn't fix that. It just, like, you can still max out quickly.
And I don't think FRB is actually ever going to work in Wings of Liberty. I think that the purpose of FRB right now is to prepare this for Heart of the Swarm. Hopefully we get Blizzard's attention with this. All we can achieve with this right now is to kind of show that what effect it has on the game in terms of how much you can produce, and that it is a good thing. It will never be balanced. It will never fix death balls totally, because once you grow a death ball, then you have that death ball. So it won't change that. It just slows down how fast you make the death ball, and I think that's all we can achieve with it, and we should be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
That's something that I can agree with, because there have been a few games where a Zerg player will have to get up to 5 bases, maybe 6, and then you start seeing the Ultralisk pop out, and it's like, this is 30 minutes into the game, and now you're seeing Ultralisk instead of Ultras at like 12, 14 minutes, like what I could do. And, someone let me sit back on Metalopolis one time, and I literally maxed out with Ultras at like 14 minutes. It's like, and I was on like 3 bases, so it was like, okay. FRB does spread that out more, but like I said, I think that there would have, for this to completely work, it would have to require some either production or unit design changes of some sort. People are just underestimating it, thinking like, well, this is all you have to do. Like, no, there's different stuff you have to do to make it actually work. There's more than what it appears to be.
Absolutely.
And,
Or so more is more easily defendable expands, maybe.
Maybe.
Because I mean, you. Oh well, I don't know.
Shit.
I thought I had something, but no.
I got something, guys. I got it. No, I lost it. I think at the end of the day, what we can all agree is, like, obviously by having the mod out there, being able to use it on the regular maps, it's going to allow it to, in at least as far as the map is concerned, a good map environment, test the concept to an extent, right? You'll be able to see what the problems are with it, like whether it's balance related or whatnot, but you can at least test the concept then. And at bare minimum, find out what the most important thing I think would be, which is it more entertaining for the players and for the viewers? Because those are really at the end of the day, that's what it really matters the most about any type of an adjustment to the game, right? Is it going to be more fun for the players playing, and is it going to be more fun for people viewing it as a sport? And
more lasers. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, if it was indeed more entertaining for the viewers and more entertaining for the players, that's going to be something that Blizzard's going to pick up on and potentially use a lot more than if people play it and it just ends up kind of weird and people don't really like it, obviously.
Can I be honest with you? I think it's going to be restricted to mod only. I just don't see it happening like in the game itself by Blizzard, because Heart of the Swarm's coming out and people are practicing with that.
Yeah.
And my niece. And so yeah, it's I think it's only going to be restricted to a mod, and this is just something that you would play on the side. Because, like I said, it just requires a lot of testing. Because, you know, I don't see it happening in Legacy of the Void. Why? Because that's the last expansion.
Still having Heart of the Swarm, you know? I mean, I think that's part of the reason why it was released at the time this was released, is that we want to grab Blizzard's attention. Hopefully, they include some kind of variant in the Heart of the Swarm beta. We will know in about a month from now, I guess. But
maybe even less, actually.
I just don't see it happening. It's too soon. The fact that they've been working on Heart of the Swarm for like the last year, maybe more, it's like you can't just suddenly have this idea come up 4 months ago.
You change the unit from BlizzCon.
Yeah,
they change it all the time. I mean, from the time the series... There you go.
I was just going to interject by saying I think from a developer and design perspective, Heart of the Swarm would be too soon for them to test it, because it would throw a lot of other balance things they've been working a lot on.
Because it's like they would design this whole thing, and then they would have to probably do it in the campaign too, which means they would have to go back and do all those timings and do it all over again.
Legacy of the Void would be the soonest they could test messing with income, more likely than not.
But I don't see it happening in Legacy of the Void either, because that's the last expansion, and it's like you have these great games, and then why all of a sudden change it right at the tip of it? It's like, I just don't see it happening.
And if anything, actually, if you look at Blizzard's history, any map who's had even a base that had less than 8 minerals and 2 gas, they changed to 8 minerals, 2 gas. I mean, one of the most recent examples is Daybreak, right?
Yeah, it's just a fetish.
Base, and
they just have a fetish of 8 minerals bases.
So and if you ask them, because I mean I've seen a million interviews about this, right? They'd always just say, well, they don't want to confuse players, and the game's balanced around 8 minerals, 2 gas, so we always want all the bases to be 8 minerals, 2 gas, and if we have to, we'll throw a Dust and Browder rock on top of it, and then we'll say that that will hopefully fix any issues with this getting taken too soon, or something like that, you know. Tal'Darim they did that on, for instance. Even though the designer himself didn't like it.
5 minerals. I don't understand.
I'm still hopeful.
Well,
I'm still very hopeful for Heart of the Swarm, though, that they will implement some kind of variant of this, because Blizzard don't want 200 death balls. None of the maps were designed for that heavy macro games. They were designed for shorter, aggressive games. They don't want 200 death balls. So they're going to do something about the issue. Whether that will be FRB or something completely different, I don't know, but they will do something about it. Well, I am quite sure on that.
And probably one of the most prolific matchups is that you see the 200 death balls is anything versus Zerg, right? I mean, that's really where you see it the most often. Zerg can max fairly easily.
At PvZ.
Yeah. Well, I mean, TVZ, even ZVP, right? When are you going to most often see a death ball occur, right? It's going to be a versus Zerg matchup. And part of that's because Zerg can't really press in the mid game to try and end a game if they get an advantage. And like they talked about that and how they're trying to adjust Zerg, for instance, so they can end a game so that you don't get those late game giant. And I mean, to some extent, that'll prevent the late game giant death balls, right? If when a player has an advantage, they can end the game, so long as they do it right, because they have the ability to end the game. So there is definitely some stuff in Heart of the Swarm that could change it. I mean, for all we know, you won't even need FRB by Heart of the Swarm to not really have all these giant death ball battles where it becomes more small-scale skirmishes, because the pros are already doing it. You just need to give them the tools to be able to potentially end games if they get advantages out of those smaller skirmishes.
Plus, this is a choice thing too.
Right.
You're not forced to go death ball. You just do it because you want to, and like, well, he's not bugging me all game, so I'm just gonna max out. Like, you have a choice to play a skirmish game or to just sit back and macro up. Like, the only way to ever fix that is to literally force players to do something like FRB, but that's not going to happen. It's just not.
Right.
I think
Maybe the players are not forced to make the dev balls, but they are highly encouraged because of the pathing of the unit design.
Yeah, the unit
It's just
dynamics.
better to make dev balls.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, especially Protoss with the synergy bonuses. The Protoss army just grows exponentially stronger and stronger compared to the other races.
Yeah, and I think
So it's definitely encouraged.
but they're definitely doing some things in Heart of the Swarm to address it, and they'll probably do more in Legacy of the Void to try and address it too, because they've said multiple times that they're trying to reduce the strength of the Death Ball criteria, or at least not increase it, right, and give people tools to stop people from maxing out in Death Balls if they're going to try and just sit around and turtle. So I think that we'll just have to wait for Heart of the Storm. Obviously, the mod will allow it to be tested a little more often and easily on a lot more different maps, so I'm sure you'll see a lot more, once this mod gets wrapped up, attempts at playing around with FRB, and if it really has some credence, I'm sure come maybe Legacy of the Void you could see Blizzard delve into it, depending on how Heart of the Swarm works out for them. If you still have huge problems after Heart of the Swarm, obviously then that might be a time when Blizzard might look into something like this, if like they're still having huge issues with like just the death ball mentality of play after they make adjustments in Heart of the Swarm. But obviously that's a long ways off yet. We'll have to wait and see how that actually pans out like a year from now more to really know the effects. But I think we've talked about that enough now, so we're going to take a really quick break, guys, and then we're going to move on to our next topic, which we're going to be talking a little bit about the custom UMS stuff and the potential of them. Now, obviously, these guys here, I'm going to preface this before we even go to this topic and go to a break quick. Obviously, these guys don't make, like, a bunch of custom UMS maps. They don't do a ton of scripting. Some of them aren't, like, super proficient in scripting, so we're not going to get into detail about how to make a custom UMS map. What we're going to be more looking at is just some of the potentials of it, and then relating it back to potential things that could end up in actual maps that are like tournament maps. Right. So just like there's a lot of bells and whistles you can do, and I'll explain it to you guys in just a second before we go into that question. But we're going to take a short break, guys, and we get back. We'll be moving on to our next topic. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back. Alright everyone, and welcome back to Mappers. We are on episode 8 here, and we're going to be moving on to the potential of custom UMS stuff. And as I said right before we went to break, just in case somebody tunes into the show now, obviously these guys don't make a ton of custom UMS maps. They make mostly like tournament playing maps, which are very basic in how they work as far as scripting and stuff goes. There's virtually no triggers, other than maybe stuff where it's like it limits start locations or something like that. But that's normally done after by tournaments and stuff. That's not something these guys normally do by default. Obviously, they try and make maps so that whatever amount of starting positions they have, it works. So we're going to be talking a little bit about it. And a little bit about it, of what I want to talk about is some of the potential with the custom UMS stuff. Because unlike games like Warcraft 3, to some extent StarCraft, there is the custom games in the StarCraft 2 scene. You see them played a lot. But they haven't been anywhere near as prolific, and I personally would blame that somewhat on BattleNet 0.2, and that is a joke. I reversed it on purpose because of the lack of social options, which were huge in Warcraft 3. I don't know how many people here played Warcraft 3. How many of you guys actually, our hosts, played Warcraft 3? I'm curious.
I did.
2 or 3?
3, the last one.
I
played every Blizzard game in the past 15 years.
Yeah, me too. I've been playing every Blizzard game since like Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans.
Same.
So,
yeah, that was a good game.
Yeah. But
that
I mean,
was awesome.
If you look at, and there's tons of videos on the internet that like look at the differences between BattleNet 2.0 and 1.0. There was so many social options in the game, and I think it made custom maps and stuff a lot more popular. Plus, you didn't have like an official Blizzard ladder really. You had like rankings and stuff when you did ladder quote unquote games, where it was more like an ELO thing than it was an actual like I'm number 1. So I guess the question that I'm posing to you guys initially, and then we're going to relate this back to the future of mapping and some of the stuff you can actually do with scripting. Do any of you guys feel like the custom scene might see another like Dota come out of it eventually in the future, or is Dota kind of going to be the pinnacle of custom maps and you probably just won't see it get as big with StarCraft 2?
I think that it's definitely going to get a new start with Heart of the Swarm. Blizzard already announced all the improvements with BattleNet, and they know they screwed up, and they will make improvements. I'm not sure it will be as big as Warcraft 3. It might be too late. Maybe the good UMS mappers, many of them just quit. Or they didn't even get started with StarCraft 2, because one of the things is all the social parts that lacks on BattleNet. But another thing is the search function for UMS maps. Right? It's a popularity thing. I played a bit of UMS maps, say back in 2010, for a few months before I was like, it's the same list of the 10, 20 games. And you have to scroll down all the time, and those maps sucked. Many of them was like you could play them for a little while, and you're like, okay. That they still have a long way to go, and a lot of people just quit on it. And there will be a second coming in Heart of the Swarm. There should be some improvements to BattleNet, but I'm not sure that it will be enough. I don't know.
I heard Blizzard has plans to make the game list similar to Warcraft 3. I heard something like that.
Well, they're adding a lot of better tools into 2.0 with Heart of the Swarm. They've discussed a lot of it, trying to make it a little bit easier to discover new custom maps, whether it's just a custom game map or a custom UMS in itself. So they said they definitely are going to be trying to add on a lot of additional tools to make it easier to get new stuff out there just in general, because like obviously that's part of the problem right now, right? Is like Archibald was saying, if you look at the custom map list, a lot of times it looks very similar, unless there's like a Blizzard.
It's not very similar; it's the same.
Right, exactly. You don't see the nuance. You got to be willing to scroll through to see them. So I mean, and that's not to say that BattleNet 1.0 didn't have some of its faults as well. Just that because of all the social environment and stuff, getting the word out was a little bit easier, I'd want to say, with some of the custom stuff. So like, it was a more social experience. So if somebody really found a map, say like when Dota first came out, and somebody found it, they could very easily tell their friends in game, and they would tell their friends in game, and you could get a little bit more of the word of mouth spreading of maps. And the system worked a little bit differently with, you know, what was the custom games and the listing on Warcraft 3 and such forth as well. So it wasn't quite as static, I kind of want to say. So it was a little bit easier in some ways to just spread the word and such forth on some of the custom stuff. So they did indeed say that they're going to be trying to fix that problem with 2.0, that it's hard to find new maps, and good ones at that, not just whatever. They were talking about some of the rating systems and such forth they want to allow in. So, I mean, I guess we'll have to see from that front. But I kind of wanted to relate all of this back to not just, you know, are we going to see another Dota? Because that's kind of an ambiguous question. Because obviously somebody would have to have a good idea first.
Yeah, you can't tell when someone will have a great idea.
Right. What I wanted to relate it back to more was what these guys actually do here, which is they create maps. But you've seen some custom maps out there, whether it's like a 1v1 OBS map or some of the cutesy things that have been done maybe in GSL with the destructible Xel'Naga towers, where some scripting has been put into some of the maps and it adds something extra to the maps. And some of it is stuff that you can add to the maps that's not even really, doesn't affect the gameplay at all. It's just some of it is bells and whistles, like UI options and stuff. And I'm curious what you guys' thoughts were on, does adding scripting on top of good map making have maybe a future in whether it's the esports scene or just the general StarCraft 2 scene, in what people are able to do, whether it's UI options, adding additional types of information to the screen, the potential of customizing the interface itself in case somebody just doesn't like how shit's arranged on the screen, pardon the language, or little cutesy things like those destructible Xel'Naga towers. I mean, do you guys feel like there's a role with some of this scripting stuff in the future of map design? Is map design going to get more complicated down the road, or is it going to kind of remain static?
Just some maps will have triggers, I think, like to make experiments. Like I personally worked 1 year on a map like the campaign map with the lava rising and with triggers, and I tried 1 year, but I couldn't find a good layout for this. And some time ago I had an idea based on the campaign. Like there's a mission where resources spawn at some points, like on the Portzine campaign mission, with a girl with pink hair and stuff.
I'm trying to remember which one that would have been. There was a girl with pink hair, you say? Like the resources, was it one of the ones where they spawned randomly?
I mean, there are some places like a machine will drop down like a chunk of 50 minerals.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. It's the mineral race map where you're racing racing the other your opponent on that particular mission. I remember what mission he's talking about now. It's the mission where you're on like the factory planet and the opponent is you're racing them to like 2,000 minerals or something like that, and there was like little machines, and then they drop like one of those little minerals you can pick up every now and then via a trigger like once a minute or whatever. You were trying to get to a certain amount of minerals before the other guy did, because you were fighting for the help of the girl with the pink hair.
I think something like that would be possible in many maps, but of course not in every map, but maybe one or two. Like the experiment map in Brood War, like with arbiters hiding the eggs and stuff like that.
I don't see it happening in competitive play. It's maybe far out in the future, but the thing is that it's really hard to get these things accepted. As cool as they may be, we're having a lot of troubles just getting basic things on a map accepted. A map isn't accepted before it's been widely played by the biggest tournaments. And unless they introduce these kind of things, then it's not going to get accepted and nobody wants to play it. And I think it's a lot harder in StarCraft 2 to get these things accepted. But one of the reasons may be because of how the ladder works. People just want to play on these maps. It's a lot easier if you don't have like, this is the map you play, period. Like it is in StarCraft 2. If you were just playing all sorts of maps, it would be a lot easier, but people just want to play these maps that they are familiar with, and it's going to be really hard to introduce. It could happen, and it might happen, but it needs to be accepted, and that's going to take a very long time.
I guess this
maybe in 5 years in the GSL someone will make it, maybe one time, but at least it will be done.
I think, okay, if you look at melee maps in today, there's actually been a couple experiments already. I only know of one, which is Zelnaga Fortress, where they had a destructible watchtower after like 7 minutes, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was not accepted for balance purposes and for, scouting purposes and all that jazz. Recently, I tried one guy, he had a map. It was a melee map.
Mm-hmm.
But he added some weird features to it. He took like these tunnels and like added them around the map, and then he put like a beacon, and then you run your guys on there, and then they go through this tunnel. So I thought it was just really crazy.
Yeah, I remember that one. That was cool. That's a cool idea.
Anybody remember what the name of that map was?
Hang on a second.
Yeah. Anybody remember what the name of that map was offhand?
No,
I remember it too.
It's almost a year ago, so
yeah.
I don't remember.
I remember it too. It was like there was like a beacon, and your like guys like teleported when they went on the beacon. Like it was like almost like a instant transmission system on the map. It was different. That's for sure. It was definitely different.
I also thought about opening or closing doors with a beacon to activate. Like you put one unit on the beacon, and it opens or closes a door leading to a path, something like that. That could be possible.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of cutesy things you could potentially do, right? I mean, part of it would just be whether or not the community would accept it and whether or not Blizzard would support it, right? Because obviously, if Blizzard turned the entire ladder map pool into maps with crazy triggers on them, like there would be by default some more acceptance on it because the players would be forced into playing on the maps, and if the players are forced to play on the maps, that's when the players will play the maps, obviously. But obviously there would be that hurdle, right? Like there's lots of cool things you could potentially do with triggers, like you were saying with the doors that you could potentially trigger into areas, or there was, if you look at the campaign, the map where the lava rose up in certain places, so like certain areas were more difficult to mine than others. Like there's lots of cutesy things you can potentially do with triggers. It's just really a matter of if the community and the players would ever find any of them acceptable.
Or
okay,
oh, he's back with his thought.
Yeah, it's just, God, man, there's like family coming around, and all of a sudden I gotta connect to Wi-Fi and all that. Okay, but it comes down, I think it's acceptable, but more than likely triggers somehow in some way, shape, or form. They interfere with game balance. Those tunnels, definitely a gameplay balance feature. Destructible watchtowers, definitely gameplay balance. Raising the lava, debatable.
I'm not talking with expands that will be flooded.
Yeah, and I just think that if you want that sort of creativity, that just has to. I think that's only going to be limited and restricted to campaign-related stuff. But when it comes to competition, people don't want those things to get in the way. They want normal features so that they can focus more on what they're doing rather than
what is normal.
Rather than, oh shoot, I need to get that watchtower, it's going to destruct in 30 seconds. It's like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I mean, I think obviously what's going to be acceptable is stuff that doesn't affect gameplay itself, like adding extra UI tools onto the maps, obviously, because there is some of that already on there with some of it, where you see like the 1v1 ops, where people are betting on maps, and there's the new one, Peep Mode or whatever, that the guy's been pushing, where there's like, you know, you can bet on stuff, there's different observer options. I've even seen automated observer cameras on some maps, where you can literally put it on automated observer cam, and it tracks the alerts and such forth for the players, and it bounces between things. So like if there's an engagement where like one player's units are in battle, the observer camera is smart enough to automatically go to the engagement instantly. So I think there's definitely the immediate future. I would say personally, I would say it more in the UI and observer options box of things, where you can maybe make entertaining stuff that way for people watching. But I'd be really interested to see if some of the creative things you can do with scripting down the road, obviously probably not anytime soon because players would be a little resistant to it, but maybe down the road a ways, or if somebody can find a way to make a proof of concept, that you could see some of the stuff in there, because there's some really cool things you can actually do with the Galaxy Editor and the triggers there that wouldn't necessarily throw a map's balance in the toilet or something like that, but would add a very interesting dynamic to the maps. And I guess that's why I wanted to talk about it to an extent, because there's some really cool creative things you can do that don't necessarily destroy balance, but are really interesting. I mean, technically, if you have an area with, say if you want to split a map in half, right, and have like a ramp system or something, like even if they're huge ramps, right, that went through a gully, you could have the gully flood once every minute, and then it's open for a minute or something like that, where you would create interesting dynamics on a map. Now, that's not to say someone's going to do it anytime soon, but there's little cutesy things like that that are more than possible to do with the tools in the editor, if players were willing to play on the maps and accept it as an acceptable thing on the map.
Yeah,
so I guess we'll see.
If you have a trigger in it, that's why it's called a custom map.
Yeah.
So it's just really, I mean, there is a reason why there are custom maps and melee maps.
Right.
You can't just integrate that into each other. Like it's either a melee map or it's a custom map. So, I mean, as cool as it would be and as dynamic as it would be, you know, like I was actually talking with some mappers yesterday on Skype, and I mentioned like it would be pretty cool if you could like create your own island. Like, you know, you go up to your base and then you can destroy the ground around it, and yeah, you have your own island. But like that's just far and beyond. But it's just cool stuff like that. But either way, every trigger interferes with balance. It just does. Yeah. So
I think really at the end of the day what it all matters is somebody could create a concept that a tournament really liked from an entertainment viewpoint. Because that would really be the only way you would get players to accept and play on a map that has triggers, is if one tournament was like, look, we've seen all these cool maps. We had like, we got with TPW or ESV, and we said we want a set of 5 maps with neat triggers on them that's going to be really entertaining to our viewers. And then they make them 5 maps, and the tournament goes, all right, there's $25,000 on the line, but here's our map pool, and these are maps you've never played on, and they got crazy triggers.
Yeah.
If you want the $25,000, you're going to learn how to play on these maps, and then obviously the players would do it because they want the $25,000 to win the tournament. They're not going to all just go, I'm boycotting that tournament. 25,000, who needs that? So I guess that's what it would really take in the end if you wanted it to happen.
Here's really what it boils down to, and this goes with FRB, it goes with triggers, going into melee maps, all that kind of stuff. StarCraft 2 is a game where you can do things at your own free will. You can play custom games, or if you want to play competitively, you have all your alternatives with that. You can't force everyone who buys the game, all 1.5 million people or whatever, to suddenly change their playstyle and say, oh, now you got to get used to playing on maps with destructible watchtowers. You can't do that. You just
So you can if you're Blizzard, but you can't as a custom map maker.
You can force people to play maps in a tournament, but you cannot force people to all of a sudden say, oh, okay, new ball game, it's an entirely new game.
Right.
We're going to have all our maps have this weird trigger. Everyone's going to get used to it now. It's like, maybe over time people will get used to it, but it's going to upset a lot of people.
Right.
And it's just, overall, no. that kind of drastic change just doesn't happen. It won't.
So I guess at the end of the day, there's some potential there, but they would definitely have to be types of things that are very much ease the player into the concept type of triggers for them to be okay with it. It couldn't be something that really affects the game. It'd have to be cutesy more first before they'd be able to accept it, like, I don't know, a base with destructible rocks that disappears after 7 minutes, but it's like a 4th base or something like that, where it's less effective to the immediate play of the players, but it's kind of different and cute, and when a tournament's broadcasting, they can flip over to it and, whoa, look at the trigger. Something like that. So anyways, I think we spent enough time on that for now. That might be something we revisit in the future if any of the mappers out in the spectrum ever do make a custom map with triggers on it that is interesting, I guess, and that players don't just immediately hate. We're going to move into our last topic in just a second. We're going to take a really short break. We're just going to go into a very, very specific topic. We're going to basically have these guys talk about if they were designing their perfect starting location, talking about kind of like just the main base and the natural. What to them is their perfect start location for a map? What elements do you need to design a really great starting location on a map for balance, play, all those fun things. So we'll be talking about that specifically in just a second, guys, but as I said, quick break, and we'll be right back with more mappers. Alright everyone, and welcome back to Mappers episode number 8. Eventually I'm going to probably lose track of the episodes, and I won't be able to say what episode we're on. We'll see.
You mad.
I'm doing good so far. But we're going to be moving on to our next topic. We talked a little bit about the potential of scripting and stuff, which actually was kind of off of, I don't remember which viewer it was. I'd love to give you credit, but I don't remember who it was who asked a question about scripting on maps. So I want to give some credit to that topic to one of our viewers who asked a question in a previous week, because I kind of expounded upon that topic. But we're going to talk specifically now about map making, which these guys know a lot about. And we're going to just go over, like, if they were going to design, and if you're a new mapper, and you would like to take some notes on what you need to think about, the perfect starting location, and I'm mostly talking about the main base and the natural expansion right next to it, because that's really your start location for players. What you guys feel like is the perfect starting location, and we're talking about, like I said, the main and natural, like what's good air availability, what's good potential for stuff like drops and stuff, what's a good amount of space period for buildings, can the ramp sizes vary, or do they have to stay that little tiny ramp, you know, is it okay to design a map that maybe the way that main and natural layout favors one race over another at times, where maybe your main and natural will favor Protoss or Zerg or Terran, but then maybe the rest of the map has a little bit more favor towards another race. Like, do you need to have it try and be 100% balanced, or would you intentionally create a map where it's like, well, I'm going to put a lot of airspace, and it's going to be really good for Terran drops and mutas, and it's going to suck for Protoss, but I'm going to put this other third base really close to their base, so it's going to be a little bit better for them later in the game. Like, what's you guys' ideas and design philosophies, I guess, in designing, like, what you think is the ideal starting locations on maps?
Okay, unfortunately, the only ideal ramp for the main is the single-sized tiniest ramp, and that is mainly due to PvP, but also CVC, because without a ramp, link run-bys in the early game is just so destructive and so hard to deal with. You see CVC on Tal'Darim Altar is usually very short games, and it doesn't break the matchup in the same way as PvP, but players are more comfortable with a small ramp. So we are at the point where it's just a small ramp. That's it.
Yeah, and this is the specific thing we're talking about. Is he's talking about this first ramp right here, where it's a static size right now. Always, it's always this big on every, like this. This is a picture of Shakuris, actually, that I have up on the screen right now. The second ramp a lot of times will vary as to whether or not there is even a ramp, or if there's a huge ramp or a little ramp, depending on the different sizes that you want in that area. But it's always the same. So in your opinion, you can't really adjust that. Like, it's just, you can't balance it, or do you, any of you think that you can adjust things like even this starting ramp size?
Yeah, there's no way to do it due to balance of the game. I actually feel if you look at the entrance to the natural, I think that it's become standard that it's 3 gateways wide, and that's a bit of a shame. I think that you should be able to make it a little bit bigger, a bit more variety would be nice in that regard, and I think it will still function if you made it like 4 gateways wide. I don't think that will break the map.
Yeah, because there's some maps that utilize that a little bit. I mean, I have a picture of Belshir up there right now, and it's got a little bit wider main to natural choke. There's not actually a ramp. A lot of times Protoss versus Protoss will hate playing on maps like this because it kind of forces that 4-gate versus 4-gate situation when you don't have a defendable ramp, especially on a map like Belshir, where when you go to the edges you have like 2 ramps into the natural, so you can't really defend that either. But there is at least a couple of maps out there, but you think that as far as balance is concerned, if you want a balanced map, it's not really a smart way for a map designer to go?
Well, you have to look at the main matchups. You can't just look at mirror matchups and then say, like, well, this is a bad Protoss map, because if you look at Tal'Darim, for example, like, that has a choke very similar to Belshir, but it's one of the most balanced maps to date.
Right.
Like, literally, it's all like between 49 to 52% for every matchup. So it's not saying that the choke is bad. I think it's really more about how you utilize it and where you exactly position it, because Tal'Darim is a big map. It's huge. And those chokes are facing toward the center of the map. Whereas on a smaller map, a 2-player map, for example, you would want to face them more up toward the border so that the distance is longer. So I think it's not about the choke itself. It's really more about where you place it. And yeah, so that's what I'm actually thinking.
Yeah.
And you're looking at really, really old versions of these maps.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
That was actually MLG's version of Tal'Darim that I brought up.
Really?
I think they still use ?
No, they don't. They don't. I think that version is that the one with the half base as third.
Here we go. I have here's a more up to date version of Tal'Darim. Well, no, this was a post. The post is from. It's hard sometimes because a lot of times I use Wikipedia for the Tal'Darim maps, right? And like, there's one that's here that's March 2012. But when I go to the picture of it, it's clearly basically the same map. Like, I'll bring it up onto the screen as what I just had up there. It's very similar. It's, I think, a little bit different, this one. But it's essentially the same map that was in the previous picture. So the thumbnails aren't always actually up to date, which makes it a little bit difficult to find the current pictures of the map when you guys are talking about it on the fly. So I do my best, though, I promise. So anyways, but back to talking about the perfect starting main and natural. Like, would you guys say there's any specific, like, airspace requirements? I mean, do you have to make it so that a base is droppable, muta-harassable? One map that immediately jumps out to me that's definitely not that way is actually one that you made, Super Uman, which was Cloud Kingdom, where it's actually incredibly difficult to harass with mutas or drop on that map into the main. It's really hard.
I disagree.
I have a question about that, Super. That main in Cloud Kingdom, did you design that on purpose, or did it just happen to be like that because that's the only way it fit the layout?
I personally didn't like a lot of airspace, mostly because of my Brooder background, and it just something, just my style. But now when I think more about the PvT matchup, I think I should have made more airspace.
I like a bit of airspace as well, both for drop and mutas, but also to be able to place an overlord. Preferably, you want a space for an overlord besides the natural and one besides the main, so that you at the very least have the option to move in an overlord at some point.
Yeah, it's actually really easy to harass and drop on Cloud Kingdom. Of course, against really, really tip-top players like MKP or Lenok or whoever. Like, yeah, they're gonna see it far ahead of time and try and deny it. But that's not the point. It's so easy to harass that natural with air units because you have high ground right behind the natural for air units to hit them. And it's just so easy to do that. And plus, the third base that wraps around the main, there's still a little bit of airspace right there, so you can actually slip by. Of course, once you get in there, like, you're kind of trapped, but you can still slip by.
Well, I know I will say from playing this map a lot and talking to some of the higher level players who play on this map that I definitely know that on Cloud Kingdom, if you place say for Zerg, a Spore Crawler in these locations, approximately here in Nya, Medevac can't actually even slip by into the main. It'll be destroyed by the Spore Crawlers before it can get into the main.
Yeah, if you place your entire really precisely, you can deflect a lot of drops.
And Protoss can do that too with cannons, where now you block off the main from any potential drop potential. You can do the same thing at the natural, where if you have the cannons located kind of in this area, you actually can't squeeze by through here. So the only place they can potentially try and drop is in here, but if you try and drop in any of these areas, the cannon will likely destroy the medevac before they can actually unload all the Marines. So that's kind of like what I was talking about specifically with Cloud Kingdom, and why I think it was a good question by Archville to ask if that was intentional or not. Because some maps definitely have a lot more availability of airspace, and I guess, is there a balance between that ability to drop air harass and stuff that you guys actually look for in trying to design your main bases?
There's definitely, well, there's a balance, but you have to pay attention to where the bases are. That's where it comes down to. You can't just add airspace behind the main and then just be like, well, okay, now people have drop potential. It's like, no, like you need to understand. Like Metalopolis, for example, the mains are next to each other and there's a huge gap of airspace between them. Balance-wise, that's not good because you can do a 1-1-1 and immediately hit them.
Right.
You know, that's why cross-spawn was eventually enabled. That's probably one of the sub-reasons, because now you have to actually have time to do it. It really boils down to where you put the bases that it matters about the airspace. And plus, like let's say I have a natural here with my minerals facing the airspace, which is something a lot of people wouldn't like at first sight. But behind that natural, if I go around it to my third, I can potentially trap air units between my natural and third and keep those bases safe. That is good airspace because you can use it defensively as well. So it really comes down to how you position your bases. It's not a matter of like, well, I'm just going to put airspace here and airspace there. It comes down to how you put in your base layout.
I guess I want to move on to another topic in regards to the same topic, actually. As far as the actual just space available in the main. Because I think there's some different factors that can come with this, right? Because obviously if you have a huge main, it's very difficult to scout what your opponent's doing because they have so much space to hide stuff. But you need to have enough room that people can place buildings and structures in a sensible manner, because especially at the highest level, pros are very meticulous about how they place their buildings. They don't just put them in any old spot on the map. There's a reason why, like, a lot of times Terran players in certain matchups, like TVP or TVT, will throw their first supply depot in between the gas geyser and the main, because it's a easy location to put it initially, and you can lower it, and then it's out of the way for later, but it's defended by whatever you're going to use to defend your mineral lines later in the game. So there is all that kind of stuff that takes place on the map. So to you guys, is there like a certain size with starting locations that you tend to look for versus like, because like one of the things that would jump out at me immediately that's kind of a huge main is Shakiris, and I definitely find that when I'm playing on ladder, it can be very difficult to scout sometimes on that map because that main is just so large, and if somebody really wants to stop you from scouting, it's a little bit easier to hide stuff versus other maps which are a little bit easier, I guess, to scout things out. And what's you guys' opinions on that?
Well, I posted a link in the chat, and try and bring that one up on the screen.
Yeah, actually, I'll do it right now.
If you notice, now I'm not trying to diss this guy because he's an absolutely great map maker, but if you notice the mains, your starting location for your workers is like barely next to the ramp. And you can put production on both sides of it, but you can't really do anything in between. So, personally, now this is just my opinion, I don't feel like that's a good way to utilize a main base, because you have to spread out your text so much. And you know, it kind of clumps it up for Terran a little bit because now they have all their units converging to one point rather than just, you know, coming in from a line. You know, but that's why main bases, let's say he took those minerals for the main bases and put them into a corner. Now all of a sudden your main base is good because now you can put all your stuff together.
Yeah,
and
on
you just have more room
right
to maneuver. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the main base size heavily depends, or it factors in a lot with how you lay out those minerals as well, because your minerals and your gas geysers take up a lot of space in your main base. So, you know, where you put those can define how much space you actually have in your main. And normally when you look at analyzer pictures from map makers, they say like, well, there's, you know, 32.3 like space for 32.3 CCs, which means if you took 32.3 command centers and put them all next to each other, like that's how much room you have. So you want to aim around, you know, anywhere between like 25 to like 40. That's good, but it also the other half of that depends on where you put those minerals.
And the
One
shape
thing-
of the vein.
One thing I also think depends actually a lot more on the minerals is how much cliff vulnerability you have. How much of the main can be attacked from the low ground. If there's a lot of cliff vulnerability, that means a large part of the main can be attacked by short-range units or even siege tanks. So if you have a lot of cliff vulnerability, you want a big main. If you have less, then you can get away with a smaller main because you can put it all around the main without worrying about being attacked from the low ground.
Yeah. That's another thing too. If you have a lot of low ground next to your main, like Cloud Kingdom, for example, or like Zelnaga Caverns, you need to really pay attention to where you put those minerals, because if you put any siege units in range of a gas geyser, then you need to reconsider how you lay out that main base. So that's really important. So.
Anything else anybody actually want to close up on with this topic before we actually move into Q&A in just a moment? As
I think we about covered it, didn't we?
As far
Yeah,
as main...
it's all covered.
Okay.
I think.
Alright, so we're going to move on to Q&A in just a second, guys. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a quick break to allow anybody who hasn't posted a question yet and might have a question to go ahead and post it before we actually do go to Q&A. But as soon as we come back, guys, we're going to move into our Q&A portion of the show. So if you haven't asked your question yet, now is your time to post it. I see a couple of questions already in the chat, so feel free to post those questions real quick, and we'll be right back with Q&A and then our closing and shoutouts in just a moment, guys. So stay tuned. More mappers in just a second. Alright, hello everybody, and welcome back to Mappers, episode numero 8, number 8. We are going to be moving, as soon as I do the overlays right, into our Q&A portion. And we got a couple of questions up there already. I want to start with a really quick question, because one of the people asked this, and this is specifically going to be aimed more towards Superman and Iron Man. He just asked something about ESV's new map rotation project. Was there something you guys could answer about that? He was just asking about it. Apparently,
The map of the day.
I don't know, it says ESV's new map rotation project. What's his question?
Yeah, it's the map of the day. So basically, we each day we change the map of one map slot. So the popularity in the ranking system doesn't change. It's like it's based on the peep mode. The peep mode, the map of the day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, basically it's exactly like peep mode. It's just for ESV. We have all our, except they don't, peep mode takes the popular maps. We take our new maps and say, hey, every day we're going to host this map, and we have a channel for it, and join us and, you know, get some play practice on it and things like that. That builds a lot of potential for the map, and it provides an extra touch of balancing. Like last night at like 1:30 in the morning Pacific time, like we had Slayer's Crank actually go in there and test some of the maps, which was really neat. So I think it's already off to a pretty good start. So pretty much it's ESV peep mode basically for new maps.
Kind of
and it doesn't it doesn't restrict us to just map threads.
Right.
Like, okay, here's a new ESV map, and then it just gets buried like a day later.
Right.
Yeah.
Alright, so that should hopefully help clear up that. And in case anybody's not sure what peep mode is, it's kind of similar to the 1v1 OBS maps that have been out for a while. As far as the base concept go, it works differently, but it's a similar concept where a bunch of people can play on the same map. Now we're going to this question coming from Matthew Megas, same with the previous question, and I'm going to get to some other questions. He asked a pretty good question, I think. He was actually asking about how generally in the community, what a lot of times gets a lot of attention is like a lot of the drama, stuff like that. But aside from that, how do you guys actually get the community's attention into custom games, new maps, stuff like that? How can you help change some of the attitudes of the community to focus a little more on stuff like custom games, new maps, stuff that actually relates to the game, rather than the drama? Or is that even possible? I mean, is the drama always what's going to get the most attention, or is there a way to put a little more emphasis, in you guys' opinion, on some of the stuff that you guys work on with like new maps, and some of the other stuff that other people work on, like the custom UMSs and stuff like that?
It's just it's exactly the ESV map of the day.
So you think maybe some stuff like that will help to bring a little bit more attention towards all the new custom maps? Any thoughts from you on that, Archville?
It's hard. It's extremely hard, and I don't have a lot of the input. We are not doing too much about it in TPW, unfortunately. It's really, really hard to convince people to play our maps and stuff like that, and I don't really have an answer for it. I think the ESV guys are better at that. They're actually really good at promoting their stuff, so I have no input.
People just need to do what NASL did and just have an open tournament with new maps and just be like, hey, these are new maps, here's your prize.
That was terrible.
Join in.
That was terrible. There was too many maps. It was not a success.
You know what? It was in a fact that it did bring out a couple new maps. If it didn't bring out any new maps, which it did for like 2 or 3, then it would not be a success. Man, I am just slurring today.
It's okay, you got family and babies and stuff encircling you. We'll move on to the next question. Sumaden was asking, with CBTS being a remake of Delta Quadrant, how feasible is it to take a former Blizzard map and just recreate it as a tournament viable version? And an example he gave, and I'll bring it up on the screen, is how they might be remaking Crossfire potentially. And apparently Crux team is doing this. And I'll actually bring up the picture that he posted, and it does look very similar to Crossfire, but it is different. It's
the double cross position map.
Yeah, there's 2 cross positions on the map. There's double positions. It looks like it's kind of like Metropolis. I can't imagine being able to spawn in the close positions on this map. So I'm guessing this is more of the Metropolis type of concept, where you spawn in one of the 2 locations and your opponent spawns in one of the 2 cross positions. But it does look very much like a remake of Crossfire, with some of the high ground taken out and more low ground open areas put in.
It's not too much about Crossfire. If you want to look at a Crossfire remake, you should find the map called Peaks of Alamar.
Oh yeah, I could. But just in general, what do you guys think about that? I mean, I know we've talked about it a little bit before, as far as remaking those maps go. I mean, if you take a map concept and do it right, I mean, is it really, I guess, going past the idea of should you, because I think we've already answered that before in a previous show, can you?
No. If Roger was here right now, he would be just screaming no. We did talk about this a few episodes ago.
We did.
Like, honestly, okay, let me ask you this. Scrap Station. Do you know how to redesign it? I mean, just off the top of your head, do you know how to redesign Scrap Station?
Is that a challenge?
Probably not. Like, no, honestly, if you think Scrap Station, do you know how to redesign it to make it a tournament map? Probably not. Delta Quadrant, do you know how to redesign that to make it a tournament map?
It depends on how much you allow me to change, but yeah, sure, you could redesign it. Should you? No.
Maybe with a lot of time and effort and completely redesign its concept.
I think you can redesign every map. It's all about changing the proportions, adding a few things and stuff like that. Yeah, you can take any concept and make it playable if you just change it enough.
I guess the question.
Really a matter of
okay, but Delta Quadrant then you have a natural smack dab right near the center of the map. So like, how do you take that and make that a workable natural? Without interfering with...
You have to make the map pretty huge.
Yeah, but you have to be concerned about the base, the inward base in your main. Like, you can't make that your natural. You know? You have to make that a half base.
I would, if you look at Delta Quadrant, I would make it quite a bit bigger, and I would add some chokes around the outside natural, so that it will become more of a choked off natural. Change the ramp positions a bit. Then you got a playable map. I don't think it will be a good map, but it will be playable.
I mean, I think they can be made into playable maps, but it requires extensive redesign to where it's a completely different map. You can't just say, well, it's Delta Quadrant RE. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah, and Sumaden in our chat, he was trying to bring up Calm Before the Storm, saying that essentially, from his point of view, it seems like a Delta Quadrant remake. And it is very similar in some of the concepts on this map to Delta Quadrant, so I'm not calling this Delta Quadrant remade, just because I haven't personally seen anything official that says this is indeed just a remake of Delta. But Calm Before the Storm works on a lot of the similar concepts at bare minimum from Delta, where it's got one Zalaga Tower towards the center of the map. It has the backdoor expansion. But obviously, it's very different the rest of the way it plays out. Of course, this map was removed.
I can see that now. I never thought of that.
Yeah. Now, of course, this map was removed because people were very, 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 very turtly on this map, and it made for some really boring games.
And
I can't say that's a Delta Quadrant remake. Like, just because the base layouts are similar does not make it a remake.
Right. That's why I said I wouldn't call it a remake, but I'd say it has some similar concepts.
Similar, but it's not. You can't just look at it and be like, "Oh, it's similar."
But I think,
therefore it's a remake.
I think if we were going off of the idea of okay, they remade Delta Quadrant into Calm Before the Storm, that would just prove, if anything, that by the time you're done with the map, you essentially have an entirely different map. There's no way you
Probably-
could remake a bad map into a good map and have it really be the same map still, obviously. You might be able to take concepts from a map and apply it to a new map, but I mean, some of the maps, I mean, Scrap Station was a perfect example. You'd have to make extensive changes to the basic design concepts of that map to make it playable, and then when you were done, would you really even have the same concepts that you had on Scrap Station, really?
Probably the best remake of Delta Quadrant I can think of was that one map by Meltage he did a while back. I completely forgot the name of it. It had Quadrant in it, or Delta, or something like that.
I'm going to see if I can find it, because I'm not 100% sure what the name of that map would be. If I look up Delta, all I get is Delta Quadrant, so obviously that won't help me out. If anybody in the chat knows, I'll see if I can bring up a picture of whatever map he's talking about, but I can't think. What was the name of the person who created it? Do you know how to spell his name?
No.
Meltage.
I actually remember something about it.
Yeah.
He does not have anything on Wikipedia. That makes it a lot more
You know what? I think maybe I just
found it.
yeah, let me find his name. Core Delta. That's what it is.
Core Delta?
Yeah, Core Delta. That's probably the closer version of Delta Quadrant remake that I can think of, with extensive redesign applied to it.
And Delta Core. God, why can't somebody just give me an image of this? I think. Yes, I found it. Okay, I found Core Delta. I'm going to bring it up on the screen. It's really tiny. I'm going to zoom into it. So
Yeah.
bear with me, viewers. This is, I believe, it. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Whoa! And then it just left the page on me. What is going on? So, and then I also lost Super Uman. So that's brilliant. But anyways, I got it
He
up for
didn't
a
say
second.
he was still here.
I got it up for just a second. So cameras are gonna be screwed up for a second, guys. So you just got to bear with me on that. But I guess at the end of the day, and I'm gonna try and re-invite Super Uman. See if he gets back in here. So I guess at the end of the day, it is I got dissed. You probably forgot the "Are you here" thing. Because we use Google Hangouts now. Hey, look at that! Now we're back and the cameras are fixed. That's the one nice thing about this. So I guess at the end of the day, the real thing is, when answering this question, is obviously you could redesign a map, you could take the concept of the map and start working with it and fix it, but by the time you're done, you're probably going to have a completely different map, and it's probably not going to work the same as the original map. So in a lot of instances, you guys, probably as map makers, are just going to want to create your own map, because you don't want to have to share credit with fixing somebody else's mistake, because with the amount of work you'll have to put into it, you probably could have created a whole new map in the first place, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers that question. Double checking if there's any more questions that I would like to throw up here that aren't something where we're going into a weird place. One person was asking, most important question, where is Prodigy? Prodigy has a new job, which basically, long story short, the TLDR version is making it very difficult for him to schedule himself to be able to be on. Which is why we've had...
He's one of the head managers, and he's given himself a couple days off for Christmas.
Yeah. So he's pretty busy. I don't know if we'll have him back on the show eventually or not. I'd love to have him back on eventually, but we'll see. But for sure, we've had Archville hanging out with us. We'll see if he decides to hang around with us on a permanent basis or not. But Prodigy, for the most part, don't know for sure when he'd be back on the show. But you know what, guys? I think we've answered all the questions pretty well. So, what we are going to move into is our shout-outs and closings for everybody to wrap the show up for the day, because we are starting to get towards that hour-and-a-half mark, and I don't like the show to go too much over that if we can avoid it. So, let's start with Superman, because we started with Iron Man last week.
So you can follow me at ESV_Superman on Twitter, and Current Weekly is starting soon, in 40 minutes. For day 3, as usual, for Wednesday, and that's it.
And Archville?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to my team, the Planetary Workshop. You can find our maps by simply typing TBW in the search function, and you'll see all the maps we have available. And yeah, that's about it.
I'm Iron Man. You can follow me on Twitter at ESVIronmanSC. I don't tweet as much as I would like to. But you can find all our maps. Just search ESV on Battle.net or Team Liquid. As Superman said, I'm going to keep calling you that, man.
It's okay.
Korean Weekly starts in roughly 35-40 minutes. So tune into that at Twitch TV/ESVision. And I think that's pretty much it for me as well.
Alright, then of course you guys can...
I wanted to mention one more thing.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I recently got my first map into a tournament as I won the Map of the Month February. So you can find ESO The Grid or TBW The Grid on Battle.net and try that out if you want to play in that tournament, or just if you want to practice it. It's a good map, and I believe it's the first map without watchtowers to be used in competitive play. So that's interesting. I would like some feedback on that. Go play that map. It's a great map. That's all.
Ooh, you're a judge.
Alright, guys.
Flag.
Then, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at GoForNersky. I've updated my Twitter, so you can follow me there as to everything I am doing. I do tweet on a pretty regular basis anytime I have something going on. You can always watch me over on Zeke TV on Mondays, possibly on Wednesdays before the show. It's a little bit up in the air right now. Casting the PokerStrategy.com tournament. Of course, also do casting with MLG TV. Recently did some DreamHack stuff, so I get around and I updated all my Twitter. So rather than trying to shout out all the potential things I could be casting in the near future, you can always just follow me on Twitter, and I update that with everything I'm commentating for. Then, of course, I do stream some of me just playing ladder on here as well. I was actually streaming a few games just before I got on. I don't get the ladder as much as I'd like to, so I'm not the greatest player on earth, but I do alright. So you guys can go ahead and either follow this channel and watch me on here, or you can follow me on Twitter, and I always update you guys as to what I am doing. And then my YouTube is where the VODs are at, youtube.com/NerskySC. VODs of Mappers is up there along with some of my casting and stuff, so feel free to check that out. For now, though, guys, we're going to be getting out of here. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much to all the hosts of the show for being on once again, and we will see you guys more likely than not next week. So for now, guys, peace. We are out.
Bye.
Bye.
I might have to update this outro and intro. It's got Prodigy in it.
Iron Man.
Yeah.
What's up with those random faces you do?
It's Iron Man, I see.
He's all about the random faces, man. All about them. Bye, everyone.
Oh, we're